All right, I am here today with Sha'Myra Williams. Sha'Myra, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So you were a student in the LSU English Secondary Ed concentration. Do you remember when you graduated?
2015.
Of course you remember when you graduated. I can never remember when anybody graduated. So you were in cohort of 2015. It's now the summer of 2020. So I guess you're going into your 5th year of teaching?
This actually wraps my 5th year of teaching.
Okay, math,
So,
not my thing.
mhm.
So can you tell us a little bit about where you've been since LSU, where you've been in your teaching career, what you've been teaching, where you are currently?
Sure. So actually I started out at Central Middle School in Gonzales. That was my very first teaching experience. And to be honest, I think that I had a very successful first year of teaching. I didn't really feel like I had the first year teacher blues, but I know that a big part of that was my pre-service learning that I obtained through my work at St. Amant High School, which is also in Ascension Parish. So just a lot of the best practices that were present at St. Amant High School, and we all know that St. Amant High School is like a top ranking high school. So those best practices were also evident at Central. So I really just kind of fell into a really perfect storm, if that makes sense. And I've had just a really good support system at Central Middle School under my principal and the instructional staff, and literally every person that was in some sort of leadership capacity at Central has gone on to become a leader in the school district or at some other school site. So it's just been a really good like foundation that I've had from my time in the Go Teach cohort all the way up to my first year of teaching. And so from there, I decided to take a break from education, personal education, I'll say. So because my intention was to major in curriculum and instruction and get my master's in that, because I just had this mentality like, go, 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 gotta get it done. But I actually took a break for a year and I jumped right back into it. And I decided to do the educational leadership master's program at Southeastern. Ascension Parish offers a cohort for that. So that was really neat that I was able to do that within 2 years. And it really just kind of enlivened my passion for leadership, honestly. Before I took on that endeavor, I thought that pretty much the only way for you to lead in a school building is to be a principal. But I discovered that there are so many other pathways to become a leader. So really, I think that experience just kind of, it didn't really birth my leadership, but I definitely think that it helps me to expand my view of what leadership looks like. And it helped me to kind of find my place in that. And it really just kind of strengthened my innate abilities to lead. I just feel called to lead, if that makes sense. So fast forwarding that, of course, now I have all of this like burning desire to lead and like, teaching and incorporating that in my classroom. And just a little bit of demographic information. Central is a very mixed population. So again, it was a perfect storm. Like I really had a good, well-rounded first year experience. So just kind of picking up a couple of leadership opportunities like PLC facilitator, district coordinators for benchmarks, things like that. Of course, at this point, I'm feeling like I need to do more because I'm like suffocating in my classroom and I wanted to expand my reach. So this past year, I decided to apply for a mentor teacher at Donaldsonville High School. And of course, you know, the demographic there is pretty predominantly Black. Well, actually not Donaldsonville. The Donaldsonville High School is predominantly Black. And you'll see like the disparity between like the students who go there versus the neighboring private school. So at that point, I decided to become a mentor teacher for U.S. history, which was not the plan originally. The goal was to become an English mentor, but upon getting there, there was a need in U.S. history, and I felt that my English acumen could really complement what was happening in U.S. history and the shifts that are happening. So I just took on the challenge, and honestly, like it probably was the best thing for me because it really gave me an opportunity to do something outside of what I know and challenged me to support other areas outside of just what I feel is at this point, like second nature, English. So here I am today. I decided at this point I wanted to apply for a master teacher, and I think at some point as a mentor teacher, as I was following the leadership of my master teacher, I realized that I really liked the roles and responsibilities of the master teacher, and I really wanted to get outside of the classroom and impact what was happening on the school campus instructionally, because I saw that there were a lot of gaps with students and teachers. So not that I think that I'm like some type of like savior figure or anything, but I definitely felt that I was constricting myself, and I just wanted to be more of a light in that way. And I just thought that, you know, maybe the master teacher role would give me that opportunity to serve in that capacity. So I applied and I got the job. So this will be my first year under unprecedented circumstances. So it's
Yeah.
sure going to be a challenge.
So what does it mean to be a master teacher at Donaldsonville?
So a master teacher is actually similar to an instructional coach, but in a TAP world, which is the teacher advancement program. It's a system so that teachers, basically an accountability system that offers compensation based incentives or whatever. So through this program, the master teacher is pretty much the person who monitors all instructional best practices, delivers a regular PD once a week. This person provides follow-up in the form of walkthroughs, feedback, providing co-teaching, micro-teaching, all types of other ways to just be a support. And also just to kind of monitor trends that are happening and help the principal and the administration just identify the instructional pathways. So I think for the most part, the master teacher is pretty much the teacher of teachers, if I had to say it in a way that I really don't like saying it. But essentially, that's what the master teacher is, the teacher of teachers, but the students drive the teacher need. So that's what I'm constantly monitoring in and out of the classroom. And I am held responsible for teaching at least once or twice a week so that I'm still connected to the classroom. So, and it's like perfect.
All right, well, it sounds like you, I mean, it sounds like you're someone who has found your path and it's sort of listen. I mean, it sounds like you're really listening to yourself and what you need and what you want, right? And that has sort of motivated you to go out for these different things and to try these different things. And it also sounds like you're not afraid of a challenge or trying something.
Sure. Actually, I seek them out.
Well, jumping from English language arts to social studies, right, or history, which I think is a natural. I mean, I think those areas go naturally together. Right?
They do. Yes, absolutely.
Ideally, all history and English teachers would be deeply educated and able in both areas, right?
Absolutely.
Did you have a background in history?
Actually, I do not. Most experience that I have in high school, I won the history award, but I mean, no certification outside of European history AP.
Well, that's a good segue into the main topic of our conversation today. So, I think just a couple of weeks ago, I posted an article, which is something that I just do all the time on social media, right? Is post articles about education. And this was an article from the Teaching Tolerance magazine called A Crooked Seat at the Table, Black and Alone in an Honors Class. And it's by educator Kiara Lee-Heart, right? So I posted this. A lot of people responded to it. You immediately reposted it and said something like, yes, this. And then you went into a litany of things that you had experienced, right, in high school yourself as a Black student in these sort of higher tracks of the education system, right? And you had a lot of things to say. And then there were a lot of people who responded to that. So clearly this is something that hits a nerve and that is a very common experience for people. Right? Can you start out by just telling us a little bit? I think at the end of your Facebook post, you kind of sum it all up by saying it all started with high school schedule requests. You kind of, you know, tell us that your story a little bit. What kind of classes were you in, and what were the experiences that you had as a Black young woman in those classes?
Okay, yeah. So actually, it started out, like I said, with my 8th grade counselors. I went to Dutchtown Middle School, and I actually just transitioned from Gonzales Middle School, which is a huge difference in demographic. Gonzales Middle School is predominantly African-American, TAP school. So going to Dutchtown Middle School, I felt that I was already invisible. So throughout the course of my time there, for the most part, I think I just blended in with the rest of the students there. And it's not that I aspired to stand out per se, but I definitely felt that I wasn't seen. And I think there's something to be said about that for any student. So it was time for us to start scheduling our requests for high school. And for the most part, students who were typically, sought after for the advanced classes, those students were visible on campus, like the beta students and athletics, things like that. So for me, being this transfer student who I thought people didn't know my name because, who remembers Sha'Myra? But I just remember being in the library scheduling classes, and after looking at my scores for English, it turned out that was probably the best bet for me in terms of taking honors or advanced level courses in high school. So I actually talked to my mom about it, and my mom, we're actually from Convent, Louisiana, which is a rural town, like southern Louisiana. So being from there, there's a stigma when it comes to academic challenges. So I actually talked to my mom about it, and her advice was for me not to take the honors classes, just to basically listen to what they were saying, because from what she knew about taking honors levels courses, it was probably going to be too much for me. So I think she had also adopted that same mindset. And then also, just seeing different people in her cohort of people that she graduated with, there was probably a huge, aesthetically different view of what it looks like to be an honor student versus someone who takes academic classes. So, but my mom has always known me to be like an overachiever per se. So I was really surprised once I got in those courses that that's what it was. So yeah, fast forwarding that, I decided to go into my first year at East Ascension because I couldn't do the Dutchtown thing anymore. So I went to East Ascension, and I took my first English honors class. And no, I'm sorry, was it English honors? No, I didn't take any honors classes because I had transferred over to English at East Ascension. So if I had gone to Dutchtown, I would have already been in the class. So if that makes sense. So here I am taking my academic courses, and we have this thing called Freshman Academy. So that was actually the first year that it was piloted. So you had like the different teams, but I quickly realized that the teams were basically developed around academic achievement. So I just remember my first year in that class, my teacher was like enamored by me, and she always shared my journals, and she just left me these beautiful comments. And I was like, of course, soaking it all in, but at the same time, I felt that I was just like overly showered with compliments. And I started to think that possibly I was like an anomaly from the rest, if that makes sense. And I definitely didn't want that. So I went to the counselor's office, and I begged them to remove me from that class and put me in a class that was a little bit more challenging, because at a certain point I felt that like the commentary that I offered was really just on par or like with the teacher, or I was anticipating what the teacher was going to say, and that was a clear indication that I needed another challenge. So anyway, I decided to play it safe, take that one English honors class because I was afraid of potentially taking more honors classes than I could handle. And then upon being in that first class, I felt that I was getting what I needed, but I also realized that the requirements weren't as heavy. So maybe like an extra paper or like a longer book, but for the most part, it was consistent with what was happening in the academic course. So what I did notice though, is that the majority of the people that were in my class on the other team, those students were cheerleaders and football players and people whose families had a huge influence in the Ascension Parish area. So there was that dynamic. And I think it was one Black boy and then myself. So we just kind of like hung out a lot, but most of our friends were on the other teams. So we just kind of had our own thing happening in the back of the classroom, and we were just kind of there. So for the most part, that was what that first experience was like. But then following that, I decided, okay, I'm just gonna like get everything that I can get. So I'm taking all honors courses next year, because if this is what it is, I definitely can handle this. So I decided to take all honors courses for the next school year and the subsequent years. And I finally had an opportunity to take an AP course. So I decided to go with European History AP, and I decided to also do DE English 4. Yes, English 4 DE with Southeastern. So those experiences kind of helped me to
DE meaning dual enrollment.
Dual enrollment, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, so I did that, and I think that equipped me as far as like helping me to develop my writing skills. So, but outside of that, that was pretty much what the track looks like for me. And then of course, toward the end of my time, I was nominated for Student of the Year. So honestly didn't think that I was shocked that they picked me, because there was another girl that I thought should have at least been nominated, but she wasn't considered. So I don't know. I just attributed it to the fact that maybe maybe because I was a cheerleader and, you know, I had that campus involvement. But I mean, for the most part, that was what it looks like.
Was that other student a white student?
She was Black.
Okay. Okay.
So out of all the Black students that I knew that were in honors courses and had like a pretty successful tenure as a student, I was the only person nominated. So,
and when you think back on that now, what do you make of it?
When I look back on it, I really think that I just kind of had like the total package, if that makes sense. I just demonstrated qualities that were representative of what would be considered mainstream, if that makes sense. And those students, like I said, I don't know per se if those students did things that were like just not favorable, because of course I don't want to make that assumption, but I just know that for that particular, the person that I'm talking about right now, she should have been nominated because she was pretty stand up. I mean, no, she didn't cheer. She didn't have a lot of athletic prowess, but she definitely was present and she did what she was supposed to do. She was a part of a few clubs. She took on extra anytime that she could, but she wasn't nominated. So, yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about your experiences with other students in these advanced classes and with teachers in these classes, and moments when you felt like there were dynamics going on that had to do with race?
Well, I really didn't notice much of it my freshman year, sophomore year, because at that point I was just trying to get adjusted and build my own personal confidence in actually being in the class. But it wasn't until maybe about my junior year when I joined the cheer squad and I started to be a part of more civic things in the community and engaging with my peers more often, that I started to feel that I was, in a sense, just excluded, if that makes sense. So I don't think that it was an intentional effort to keep me out of conversations. I don't think that anyone treated me like the Black girl in the class, but I did feel like I did not have a role to play. A lot of the time in our different conversations that we would have, I wasn't ever really called on for anything. I didn't feel that I was treated in a racist manner. I wasn't discriminated against. So that's the thing that made it so difficult for me, because there were no like overt displays of exclusion. It was really covert, and in a way it was also just pure ignorance. Like I don't think that the teachers knew that that's how they were making me feel. So because of the fact that I was feeling this way and I was internalizing all of that, I felt that I just had a place, and my place was to just be in the class, get what I needed to get out of the education that I was earning, and then also to just kind of do what I need to do and go back with my other friends, you know. Like that space really just served me to get the challenge, and that was it. And you know, oftentimes we would have like group projects and things like that, but I never felt that my voice was necessary. Not that it wasn't valuable, but just not necessary, because there was probably somebody else in the class or in that group that probably had something more meaningful, if not.
Ooh. Just lost sound for a minute.
Yes.
Hey, what happened?
Sometimes my computer decides to update on me, and it's been happening a lot over the summer. That's what's going on.
Okay, all right.
But we should be fine.
That's fine. I paused once you disappeared. I paused the recording, so it's back on now.
Okay.
So I think you were talking about.
I was saying that, like within my group settings, I would feel that I didn't per se. I wasn't necessary. Like my presence wasn't required.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel that I was equally heard in the group anytime we had them. So again, not blaming any particular person or the group dynamic. I just think that, especially with the students, like they thrived and they pretty much operated in this way for so long, especially in those little small groups, that, I mean, me being a part of the group was not a deal at all, literally. And also I started to notice too, like the social stratification that was taking place within these classes. So you'll see, for the most part, students who probably shouldn't have been in honors classes taking honors courses so that they could be with their friends, you know, or just to be a part of the conversations that were being had. Versus, you know, my friend, I knew that there was no real possibility that they would have either A, considered it or been taken seriously if they decided to consider it. So it was definitely like an in-crowd type of environment.
Because even when you say that you looked around and noticed that a lot of people were cheerleaders and athletes, mm-hmm. I wouldn't necessarily think of those being the top populations that
mm-hmm.
that would be sort of overrepresented in honors classes or AP classes. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
At least in my own high school experience, like athletes would sort of be all over the place, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this idea that sort of because you have those social roles, you also sort of get into these other classes is sort of odd.
It definitely is.
So you notice anything from the teachers? I think you talked about things like your name. I don't know if that was an issue.
That was actually an issue with my peers. So they thought it was endearing to call me things like Sha'Myra or like, hey, Sha'Myra, you know, just like all the extra like emphasizing of my name. And I do remember distinctly, we had a conversation once about Black Santa Claus, and someone from the group was basically commenting on how they saw a Black Santa inside of a Black-owned business, but at that time it wasn't called like Black-owned business. They're like, oh yeah, in this shop, the Munsons, yeah, he had a Black Santa Claus, you know, and I'm like, what's wrong with Black Santa Claus, you know? So, and that was actually my senior year. So I've actually developed somewhat of an identity at this point. And I'm also just starting to become more aware of how like my peers view, you know, race relations and just how we see each other in our humanity. So that conversation was really touchy. I'm getting like kind of shaken just thinking about it, because I remember literally screaming and being angry because I was trying to articulate that it's okay to have a Black Santa Claus, but I was truly outnumbered. I mean, most of the students in the group agreed that Santa Claus was white and like, you know, Saint Nick and like all the historical references that they could pull out. And then also there were the ones who were laughing. So it was just kind of, for me, it was like, it was the beginning of like a new phase in my life where I felt like in order for me to be able to articulate what I know is true, I need to be able to back that up with evidence. I need to also have my same facts. And I also started to question, why is it that like my community or my family and my upbringing didn't provide me with the same opportunities and the same access to knowledge and information that it seems like these students just kind of have inherently. But I know that it's not inherent. I know that it's because they've been exposed. So of course, at that time, I didn't know that, but I decided to become real Black power and like, you know, learn as much as I can and like go on Google and search up anything that I can get my hands on so that I wouldn't have that same feeling of humiliation again. So that was a particular event.
And what was that experience like for you? Were there other Black students that you could talk to about this stuff or even
So there was one other Black student in the class. She was African. Her name was, well, not important, but she was African, and she had already had that experience. So she was always like the butt of like the jokes in terms of her Africanness, and she embraced them. So I always told her, she was actually a good friend of mine. I always encouraged her not to laugh, like just basically to stop, enjoying the jokes with them, because that's just reinforcing that they're okay. And her response was basically just that if she would just make it funny, then it wouldn't be so offensive. She would just allow them to like make jokes about, her hair and like being from Africa and her language and things like that. That it wouldn't be a big deal. So, at that point, I'm like, at that age, I'm like, oh, makes sense. Carrying on, I remember the girl that I was telling you about, who should have been nominated for Student of the Year. She's actually Jamaican. So I remember once we were in one of our English classes and the students asked them to share their language. We had just finished reading something by Zora Neale Hurston, so they decided to do like this display of their native tongue. So, so the girl from Jamaica, she started to speak in her native tongue, and then the girl from Africa, she started to speak in her native tongue. So then there was this big conversation in class about like who had the better language and which one was prettier and like which one, yeah. So I'm like, yes. So
none of the white students were asked to share their native tongue.
No, because we speak it all day long. but yeah, so, and just keeping in mind that the teacher is present in the classrooms. So just for the sake of the interview, that's important to note that the teachers are here, but they're not like facilitating the conversation. They're just kind of like outside of the conversation, just kind of looking in. And I can't tell if it's for the purposes of just trying not to make it more provocative, or because they don't really have an entry point, or they don't really know where it's going, or maybe it's just all intriguing. So, I think as teachers, we struggle with that sometimes. Yeah. But I definitely think there were some occasions where I felt that the teacher probably should have had a role in kind of, silencing some of the misinformation that was taking place in the classroom, even if it wasn't offensive. And I think that's probably what it was, because it wasn't offensive or on the surface offensive, and probably because it wasn't derogatory, that it seemed like it was okay. But in reality, it was actually a part of like forming my idea of who I am and my blackness in a space that's pretty much reserved for white people.
Right. So as a teacher, what have you seen? Have you seen these kinds of dynamics in the schools where you've been? Have you found ways of working with both students and teachers around these kinds of issues? Is that something that you choose to take on?
Okay. So as an educator, I've definitely had my fair share of experiences. I've seen so many different things in the classrooms, just even in the hallways. For example, I can tell you lots of stories. So I'm gonna try to keep myself aligned here, because this is really like more of like a cafe conversation.
Sure.
But yeah, so I just remember once a teacher decided that she wanted to reprimand a student because he would not take his hoodie off. And when I say the teacher, I'm going to say white teacher. Okay, so the white teacher, she wanted to reprimand the student because he had his hoodie on and he would not take it off. And he was already on like his third suspension. One more, he was out of here. So she just was on him about it. So finally, I just kind of stepped in, but I was just thinking, like, what is it about this hoodie? Like, why are you so invested in this hoodie? And also, is it really worth you getting suspended behind? So I just kind of took a step back and I watched the situation, and he was extremely disrespectful, just basically trying to get her to leave him alone. But then it just clicked. He needs a haircut. So I walked over to him and I was like, when was the last time you got your haircut? And he was like, 3 weeks ago. And I said, well, I mean, why don't you have your haircut? He was like, oh, my dad said that he was going to bring me. He keeps telling me he's going to bring me, but he's not. He hasn't shown up. So I told her to basically leave him alone. He needs a haircut. I'm gonna go talk to the office and just like let it be known, because he also has some like behavior problems, and he's also someone who is very proud of like his image. So when I realized it was that, and I told her what was going on, she was almost moved to tears, because she's like, how would I have known that? How would I have known that not having a haircut would have that kind of impact? And honestly, I didn't have an answer for her. So that was something that I struggled with, because even as just being a Black person and as an educator, I have certain advantages when I'm working with African-American students that white teachers just don't have. And a lot of it is going to come from just trial and error. But unfortunately, sometimes those missteps could leave a lasting impression. And sometimes students are not resilient, especially whenever they have like champions in other areas. So for example, pretty sure that even if she did apologize to him, he would probably look to me as his go-to and basically just cast her off as just another person that, you know, rubbed him the wrong way or he had a bad experience with. So I understand both sides of it. So there was that one experience. Another experience was whenever a teacher decided to reprimand a student for kneeling at the flag. So yeah, so that was a big deal. I remember myself and another Black teacher, we were livid about the situation because we felt that we really shouldn't have intervened in that process. She did ask us about it, and now she refers to it to this day as the incident. Because I think that she realized that she was imparting a lot of her own personal and political views into the classroom. So I've been playing the role of like counselor, I guess, when it comes to Black affairs, with interacting between students and teachers. And sometimes it's exhausting. It's exhausting because it feels like I'm held to the responsibility of just making sure that I know everything, and I seriously don't. I remember too, my first year teaching, I'm kind of all over the place right now because I'm just pulling things, but I remember first year teaching, one of my biggest challenges was trying to make sure that I did not break from standard English as an English teacher. And it was hard because I code switch often. And I know that especially as a person that's trying to immerse my students in standard English and I'm trying to teach them and we should be practicing often, it was really hard. But then I decided to just cut the crap and just be myself and really demonstrate to them that it is okay for you to have two languages, and I'm doing it now. So the difference between not having that advantage and also just being ignorant to like the difference between the fact that there are two different languages. I know how to speak standard English if I want to. I know how to write it. I know how to like break it down. But in this setting, I'm going to show you that it is possible to have both. So once I did that, I felt liberated. So let's fast forward to my experiences at my new site. So this particular site, the honors classes are technically academic courses. It's just that these students are just a little bit more studious, if that makes sense. So they're more willing, they're more well-behaved, they're more likely to complete their work. They don't get in trouble. So it's really just like, to me, I don't think that it's necessary to have honors classes at this particular school because the students are not producing honors level work, in my opinion. Yes, especially when you're looking at it in comparison to the schools across the district.
Yeah, so they're well behaved and they do what they're supposed to do, but they're not being super challenged.
They're not. No, and like the average ACT is like an 18 there.
And this is a difference between schools that you've taught at that are majority white and the schools you taught at that is majority Black.
Yes. Like the standard is very low. In actuality, when we grade our benchmarks, which is our district assessment tool, we don't actually use the honors level scale. We use the academic scale whenever grading the honor students because it would drop their scores so low if we use the honor scale.
Have there been conversations? I mean, I know you're just starting there.
Mm-hmm. We've had conversations about it. We have, but it seems like we just choose to use the academic scale because we feel that it's unfair. It's not considering the African-American students who attend the school that I'm at right now. So we actually—
But neither is neither are low expectations.
Yeah, definitely. The expectations are low, and I think that a part of the expectations being low, it's clouded in care. So it seems like you're really demonstrating like how much you care about the students, but in reality, you're not holding them to a high standard. But also, we're not able to really retain quality teachers at this particular school because the turnover rate is just so high. So I think too that the teachers have a limited, not all teachers, but a good chunk of the teachers have a lower capacity. Mm-hmm. We're constantly having to reinforce best practices. Teachers feel especially that they're not valued when it comes to their teaching, possibly by some of the students, the staff, the parents. So they feel that they're basically saying that their output is not worth the input.
Oh, it sounds like one of those vicious cycles.
It's a vicious cycle. Like right now, I'm working on my dissertation, and I know I'm doing too much, but like I'm working on that. And one of my potential ideas is just of developing learning cultures across the campus, and not just for teachers and PLCs, but for students as well. We really think that we're lacking a culture of learning at this particular school, and it's evident through our academic and honors courses. In fact, we don't have any AP courses. We don't have any dual enrollment courses.
It's so strange because you're describing a student population that sounds kind of ideal, right? Mm-hmm, and like they're willing to do the work. Right. Mm-hmm. And they're not running around, doing a whole bunch of crazy stuff. So it sounds like you've got a student population that probably would rise to challenges.
But this is actually like a group of students, I would say a cohort. So the entire school population is about 368 kids. And of the 368, I had the honors course kids for U.S. history, and there were about 40 kids in that particular class. So it wasn't this huge population. It was a very small, tight-knit population of students who, again, were football players and basketball players and cheerleaders, because it was a social gathering more than it was about challenging each other academically. But I think because there were some students in there who had the academic potential, I would say, which all of them do, but for the most part, there were some who really took it seriously. Those students caused other students to rise to the occasion, especially when we would have like class discussions and things like that. So, but I definitely noticed that there was a difference. And one thing I definitely remember, my first couple of days there, there was this big question mark over my head, because they were trying to figure out basically who am I? Who was this person that's standing in front of them? And one of my first questions that I asked them was, like, what high school do you think I went to as a part of my, like, getting to know the teacher? So I had the options of, like, Santa Maud, Dutchtown, EA, and all the others. And they were like, oh, you definitely went to Dutchtown. And I'm like, I definitely did not. In fact, I did not want to go to Dutchtown. But they definitely like looked at my like intellect and my ability to like explain things properly and my passion. They associated all of that with going to a school that is affluent for the most part. And so I had to, a lot of my work during that year of teaching as a mentor was about breaking down these assumptions and helping them to see themselves outside of just their little community, because they really see themselves as, kind of like a subcategory of people.
Yeah. Are most of the teachers at the schools that you've taught at white women?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, this is the national state, right?
Yes.
And obviously lots of white women are wonderful teachers and deeply caring and everything else, right? So, but the national trend is that we have white women teaching non-white children, right? So there, as you talked about, there are certain kind of cultural things that just aren't understood and that can cause clashes and problems. So do you, I would imagine it's pretty clear to you when you're working with a group of Black students that they are seeing you as maybe different from their other teachers.
Definitely. I am the different one. And I mean, not that I don't think that I have a good personality or anything, but I feel that my students gravitate to me, not so much because of my personality, but because of my difference in comparison to the other educators that they have had experiences with.
So do you have plans for how, as a leader, or maybe you've already started doing this, how to work with teachers to give these students the respect, the expectations, the challenges that they deserve?
So right now, and I hate to even use it in this sense, but Donaldsonville is really like a case study in my eyes. And unfortunately, it's just that way because that's where I am. But like I said, everything that I've been doing has really just been falling into alignment. And I'm just really grateful to God for that because I could not have come up with this, again, perfect storm. But a lot of my dissertation work has been around, multicultural education and providing teachers with the tools that they need to be advocates for students, especially students of color, and just working in a TAP school, which I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but TAP schools are basically schools that need a turnaround. So these schools are, for the most part, underperforming, and you'll see that majority of the communities that TAP schools reside in are Title I schools or free and reduced lunch, however you want to codify it. But essentially, I've been just thinking about how can I use my influence as a master teacher to try and start fostering some of these conversations. So in our weekly PDs, I'm planning to incorporate responsive teaching. And hopefully, as a part of the leadership team, we'll start to revamp our positive behavior incentive system, PBIS. So through PBIS efforts, I'm looking to not only incentivize students for doing things that are expected, but just also incentivizing them for, rising to the challenge and rising to the occasion, especially in terms of their academics. So just trying to kind of rethink how we provide, how we reinforce certain types of behaviors. But also, as far as the teachers, I really think that it's going to have to take a lot of deconstructing some of their experiences, because for the most part, those who have been at this particular school for more than 5 years, they have found a system that works for them, and that's just what they want to do. But we also have the advantage, and I mean, some people may not think there is an advantage, but we have the advantage of having a high rate of Teach Ascension and Teach for America teachers, first-year teachers as well. So I look at that as an advantage because that means I have an opportunity to foster some new ideals, and I can start to impact them from that standpoint of just knowing that they're blank slates for the most part, and they're ready and they're willing to absorb information. So I look at it as an advantage.